Happy 5th anniversary, One Church. 5 years old. What an exciting number. It's an exciting number because, well, we have 5 fingers on our hand and 5 toes and 5 senses. And, 5's an important number in the Bible. The Bible calls 5 penta, which means 5, but it's important. And it's important in the life of One Church. We are 5 years old. A lot has happened in these 5 years, and I want to share some of that story with you today. At a point in life where I was at my lowest, and to be honest, Joanne and our boys, our whole family, was at our lowest, our weakest. I was at a point where I didn't even think that I wanted to be a pastor again. You see, we'd gone through church hurt, and unfortunately, a lot of people have gone through church hurt. But when I was at my weakest, when our family was at their weakest, God gave us strength, gave us provision, gave us protection, and again gave us purpose. During that time, God put some very important people in our lives. Ted and Ann Otwell, Andy and Denise Hagan, Ted and Amber Turner, and many others. But they were central to helping heal us and helping encourage us and really helping us become a church.
Our journey to One Church was 15 years ago. Pastor Gene became our pastor. And 5 years later, we met in their living room and had about 50 people. And that's basically where One Church started. Pastor Gene was not only a friend and a pastor, but we considered him part of our family, all of his family. The boys, Joanne, we loved them more than anything.
On January the 24th, about 50 people met in our home. We met to pray, to worship, and to kind of make some decisions on what we wanted to do next, what we felt God wanted us to do next. And it was out of that day, out of that worship, out of that time of prayer, that God birthed One Church. We came together, a group of people, all feeling the same hurt, but also feeling the same healing and grace and protection, provision and purpose from God. And God brought us all together as One Church. Coming out of that day of worship at our house, we put together a church. It was a very hectic week. We did everything that you wouldn't do for a church plant. We started with no funding, no organizational support, no surveys, no location, no anything in human terms. But in every no, there was God saying yes. So that week, as hectic and chaotic as it was, we saw God's activity as He brought together a group of hurting people, a hurting pastor, and He started One Church. During that week, Andy and Denise and Amber and Ted met at our house often. We talked about what would we call this church. We went to the Word of God, and we found a passage out of Ephesians chapter 4. It talked about unity. That was something that was very important to us. So out of that passage, out of all that we had been through, a passage on unity became One Church. During those times at our house, we sat around and tried to figure out where we would meet. It was important because we realized even after that very first Sunday in our home that was not going to be large enough. We needed a place. I needed a place to worship. We needed a place to grow. It was on one of those nights that I can remember so vividly, Andy saying these words. I have a pastor friend in Dallas, and he always said we could use this church. Let me give him a call. And that began an incredible journey.
Hey, our OC story begins January 20, 2020. Builders None, we were doing a recovery event at a church up in Douglasville, and just so happens Gene Fields was the pastor there. and he introduced himself as the janitor. I knew he wasn't the janitor, but I realized that night that he was a really, really good guy. And several months went by, and I got a phone call from Gene, and he had asked me to come lead worship at his church. And my first thought was, yeah, I'm not interested, but Gene was kind of persistent, and he said, well, just have lunch with me. So I agreed to have lunch. I'm like, well, absolutely, I'll have lunch with you. I'm not gonna, deny God an opportunity if he's in it. So we had lunch together, and as we were walking out, I was thinking, man, this is such a really nice man. And then our two trucks were parked out front of the restaurant, and he said, is that your truck? And I said, is that your truck? They both had Georgia Tech tags on them, so I knew immediately we were gonna be pretty good friends.
And during that same time, prior to the lunch, Andy and I had already spoke about we really don't want to travel 45 minutes to go to church because, we're very involved in our church, and that would be hard for us, to be involved. So I went to Sherwin-Williams, and I met a pastor friend of Andy's, and he had told me that he had recently left his church and was going to a different church, and coincidentally, it was a 45-minute drive to his new church. And he said, at first, that bothered me. He said, but now it's nothing. He said, I don't even realize that I'm having the drive. So I really couldn't wait to talk to Andy on the phone to hear about how his lunch was and to tell him about the conversation that I had with his pastor's friend about the commute. And I don't know, I just felt like it was a God wink saying, this is it.
Yeah, so anyway, when she told me that, I was like, well, I'll call Gene tomorrow. I called him. I said, hey, I'll come help you out. And I sat in on their leadership meeting, I think that Tuesday evening, and I think by the end of the week we realized that church was going to be canceled because of the COVID epidemic. So Gene had called me back, and he's like, well, how about just doing Facebook Live with us? So I brought Builders None in, and we did Facebook Live for 2.5 months or so. And then once the pandemic was kind of closing out, we could get back to church. I stayed on with him there, worked with some of the folks that he had there. Then during that, I don't know, probably 6, 7, 8 months after that, had the opportunity to bring in a few of my friends to come lead worship with us. And everything was going really well until it wasn't. And anyway, we left that church as a group. And I know Gene was really hurt. And he called me to tell me that what had happened. And I said, well, you just let me know what you're doing. I said, you brought me all the way up here to Douglasville. I said, I'm with you now. You're stuck with me. So he called me a couple of days later, and he was like, man, I woke up in the middle of the night, and God's just laying out the church. And I said, well, let's do it. I said, let's do it. I'm with you. And that was the beginnings of One Church. Our first Sunday, we met in Gene's living room, Gene and Joanne's living room. And then I had a friend that had always told me, anytime you need my church, you take it. So Wayman, thank you for that. And we were able to start having Saturday night services. And Saturday nights were some of the sweetest services that we've had at One Church. Do you agree?
I do agree.
January 30th, 2021, at approximately 7:08, because we never started on time, for the very first time, I said these words: One Church, welcome to Saturday night. And that began an incredible God journey. Just a week earlier, One Church didn't even have a place to worship. But Pastor Wayman Landman of Crossroads Church invited us to use his church. He said you can use it any time but Sunday mornings. And that began Saturday night worship at Crossroads for One Church. It has been over 4 years since I've been behind this pulpit and been in this sanctuary. This place was more than just a sanctuary. It was a place of healing. Oh, we worshiped here, but it was a place that we healed here. And we needed a place to kind of recover. And that's what Crossroads was for us, a place of recovery.
Hello, I'm Debbie. I'm a member of One Church, and I also participate in the OC Recovery Program. Going into my early 50s, I really felt broken and lost, and like my life was spiraling out of control. At the same time, Pastor Gene went through a life-changing event that left him broken and lost and hurt. Fortunately, Gene had a family, he had friends and colleagues that really supported him, and together they were able to establish one church in Dallas, Georgia. Also at that time, a family member, my sister, she just kept asking me over and over and over to come to church with her, and I always said no. But finally, I had hit my rock bottom, and I said yes. And I went to church with her, and it just so happened to be one church in Dallas. And this is how I know that God is working behind the scenes to bring about His plans and His purpose for all of us, because the first time I visited one church in Dallas, it was the first time they were holding a recovery meeting there. And I sat in on the meeting, and I listened to a young lady give her testimony about her life. And I listened, and I resonated with everything she was saying. The feelings that she was expressing about loneliness and no self-love and no self-worth and no self-respect. I felt the same way about myself my whole life. I sat there and I listened, and I had tears running down my face. I felt conviction, and honestly, I felt the Holy Spirit upon me. And I felt that through the rest of the service that night and the rest of the week. And finally, on that Thursday of that week, I just couldn't take it anymore. I just dropped to my knees, and I asked Jesus to come into my life and change my heart and be my Lord and Savior.
It's quiet now, but I can almost hear OC worship behind me, playing, worshiping, leading us in praise. I can hear the kids in the back in the kids' corral. We had this plastic kids' corral that the kids stayed in, and you could hear them the whole time I preached. I can feel the cold water of the baptistry. It was so cold that Ted and I would go to the microwave and get small containers of water and heat it up, just so it'd make it bearable. I can look around this room. I can see where people sat. I can see the faces, see the families. I can see one church. It wasn't long that one church needed a home of its own. And when we started that journey, God showed up big. And we heard the words Buchanan for the very first time.
And you left out the part where we think you got Gene fired.
Yeah, when I had Gene's former church, Denise kept telling me when I come to do worship, she said, "You're going to get Gene fired." Well, guess what? I guess I kind of did. But he left on his own. But anyway, Saturday nights were amazing. And like I said, we continue to build our worship group, and man, God continued to grow. And we got to the place where we needed a facility. And I'm going to let Denise tell that part of the story about how we ended up here in Buchanan.
Well, we were looking at several places. Nothing seemed to be a proper fit or needed a lot of work. And I had drove through the city of Buchanan a few times and never noticed this church building until that day and saw for sale sign on the marquee. And when I looked at the building, I said, who would buy that ugly church? And I went on my way and came back through from running my errands in town. And again, I looked at the church and said, who would buy that ugly church? Well, then the next day, I was out running errands again, said the same thing the third time. And when I did the third time, I felt so convicted. There's a stained glass window at the top of the church with Jesus, and I thought, He is overlooking this entire community, and here I've said that this is an ugly church, and this could be a beautiful place. So as we're out looking at churches, we're not finding a fit. I kind of whispered into Andy's ear, well, there is that church in Buchanan. I don't know if anybody'd be interested in it, but maybe it's worth a look.
In July of 2021, I got a call from a man I did not know, Pastor Alan Wilburn, the pastor at First Baptist Church of Buchanan. He told me these words: "I have a church building for sale, and I'd like for you to come and look at it." Well, in August, a group of us found our way to Buchanan, and we came and looked at this church. It was a church that needed a lot of tender, loving care. But we were the right people to show this building a lot of tender, loving care. We purchased the building in September, and on October the 17th, One Church had its first worship service in its new home in Buchanan. Our plan was that we were going to renovate the upstairs, the sanctuary, and have worship in the fellowship hall. But on that first Sunday, we had so many people. We had people outside the fellowship hall, down the hallways. We realized real quick that our plan was not going to work. So that next Sunday, we had worship in the sanctuary. And for the next year and a half, we had church with some form of construction, some form of renovation going on. But it was perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to come to church. I learned that a lot of people at One Church have hardships. They've been through pain and suffering, and also trials and tribulations. Our pastor and our leadership team, they seen that also and recognized the need for a support system for us and others in the community. So they brought in people to help build up the OC recovery program here at One Church.
Hey folks, my name's Joey, and this is my smoke show of a wife, Kara, and we are the recovery pastors here at One Church, and this is a little bit of how we got here. A little over 4.5 years ago, my wife and I decided that we were going to escape the Atlanta area and move somewhere. We didn't really know where. We had been discussing different places in the North Georgia and West Georgia area. We had been very fortunate to start connecting with some recovery work out in sort of the West Georgia, Carroll and Haralson County areas. And as much as we didn't want to move into Haralson County, God kept seemingly pushing us that way, and we wound up in the metropolis, or maybe as I like to think of, the Tri-City area of Bremen, Tallapoosa, and Buchanan, and our lives have never been so good. A buddy of mine, Johnny, knew a guy, Gene, and said, hey, these guys would probably benefit from a recovery program at the church they're starting out in Buchanan, and why don't you go check it out? So I thought, hey, that's a great opportunity. I'll go see what's going on at this little church at the time I thought it was Buchanan, but lo and behold, it is Buchanan. Show up, eat a spicy sausage pasta dinner, and wouldn't you know it, every toilet in the building stops up. And on my first visit at this wonderful church, I find myself plunging every toilet in the building. So in between plunging toilet number 2 and number 3, I felt like the Spirit just said, this is where OC recovery needs to begin. And just like that, the miracle happened. OC recovery was born. And now 3.5, 4 years later, we have a thriving recovery family, and it reaches into our community. It is the backbone of what has become our church, and it ripples throughout the county in West Georgia. And it is nothing more, it's nothing less than just a miracle that this has happened and that God brought us here to be a part of it. I could have never picked to be here. I would have never picked to be here. And I think that's what makes it so special, that God has ordained it to be what it is, and we are a small part of it. And it is truly a blessing for me and for Kara and for our family.
Joey and I both have been truly blessed by One Church and by our recovery family. There's a humongous sense of community here at the church. I have met some of my best friends here, and no matter who you are or where you come from, you're welcome here. And that's what I love about our church.
It's been over 4 years now since we've been in this building. It's beautiful. We're so thankful. We're trying to be good stewards to what God has given us. We're so thankful to be in this community, Buchanan, a place 5 years ago I didn't even know existed. And today it's where we're serving God. The borders of One Church, they stretch far. They stretch to our ministry partners in Costa Rica, the Philippines, and everywhere in between. God has given us a purpose to love His people and to love Him. And I think we're doing a pretty good job here in Buchanan.
When we found out we were going to move to Buchanan to have church, it was a perfect time for us to then move to Rome. Our daughter and her family have been living in Rome for years, and so we decided, this is what we needed to do. We could move to Rome and still have about the same amount of time to commute from Rome to the new church or from Douglasville to the new church. So Rome became our new home. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it would be easier if we could just find a church in Rome and become actively involved there, because it's 45 minutes away and we have to plan it, but we couldn't do that. This isn't just our church. It's our home, it's our family. These people are so important to us, and it's not just the people, it's what God's doing here. He's doing so much in this building, in this place, in this city, that have started some things rolling, and we've become a place for people to come to when they need help.
One Church and the One Church Recovery Program has completely changed my life, and I've watched it change the lives of many, many people in this church. I thank Pastor Gene for going in the direction on the path that God put him on. I thank everyone at One Church who prayed me through those doors. It has changed my life. The world may have broken me, but Jesus put me back together. And One Church and the One Church Recovery Program helps me stay together.
It has been an incredible 5 years as pastor of One Church. I'm as excited today about the future of One Church as I was 5 years ago on that first Saturday night in Dallas. To say that I know what the next 5 years holds for this church would not be truthful. What I do know is that this church will not be the same. The building won't be the same, the people won't be the same, and I won't be the same. I'm not necessarily talking about modernization, new facilities, people getting older, the church growing, and I prayerfully hope all of those things happen. But I do know that One Church will love their Lord, their God, with all their heart, with all their soul, with all their mind, and with all their strength. And we will love our neighbors as ourselves. We will love God and love people.
Where could I hide that your great love couldn't find?